as we speak. So thanks for joining us to everyone. Thank you, Masha, for asking me to present this webinar, and thanks to Izzy and Angela, fantastic panel, for joining us. My name is Nick Levine. I'm a chartered accountant and fintech professional. Before going over the agenda and structure for the webinar topic today, I'd like to introduce our panel. First of all, we have Izzy Rosenberg, who is a zero chartered accountant specialist at Harris Rosenberg. Izzy, thanks for joining us. Would you like to do a quick intro, elevator pitch about yourself?
Hi, so my name is Izzy Rosenberg, and I work for family firm Harris Rosenberg. I've worked very closely with our small business owners, and I've transformed the firm from being a traditional firm into a modern cloud accounting practice.
Thanks very much, Izzy. We're also really grateful to have Angela Brown today. She's director at Finflare. Angela, thank you for joining us. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, certainly. So I founded Finflare 2 years ago, and we are a specialist advisory firm working exclusively with VC-backed and angel investment-backed businesses from early stage right through their funding journey. I'm a chartered accountant with over 20 years PQE. I worked for many years in a large international practice, and about 7 years ago I joined, I moved to industry to be a finance director, and subsequently worked as a freelance CFO in the startup space.
Thanks very much, Angela. So we've got two very different sort of unique and equally worthy perspectives, so great to have such a diverse panel for today. So I think just to kick off, we're just going to run over the structure of the webinar today. Hopefully that's so. I'm going to break this down into sort of a real holistic look in terms of what, how to be a successful accountant in 2023. I'm going to cover everything from sort of technology needs, what are the skills you need and sort of app stacks you need to be rolling out to your client base to be at the cutting edge. Looked at internal practice management tools, which are becoming more and more important post-COVID, as there's become more of a need for communicating with clients remotely and sort of remote working. And then looking at service delivery, how automation has really enabled close to real-time data, but how you can then use that to set yourself out from the competition. And then really more the more human side of accounting, in terms of looking at, what are the skills that we need that technology isn't doing? What skills do you need to master technology? How do you staff your sort of jobs where technology can't fill in those gaps? We'll have a bit of time for Q&A at the end, but I think as we go through these topics, if you have a question, drop it into the chat and the Q&A, and we'll pull out the relevant ones in terms of the flow of the conversation. It might work better that way. And so before kicking off with the first technology needs topic, I just wanted to put today's sort of panel into a bit of a wider context in terms of where we are 2023, one day after the budget. Of course, there's always something going on. So cloud accounting, it's been part of the mainstream now for over a decade. We've also had digital adoption that's been really accelerated by the pandemic, where clients have needed support like never before. And we've had those growing trends around sort of remote working, which has really accelerated technology adoption. And in terms of latest tech developments, AI, ChatGPT, which there's a news story about every day. Actually saw a couple of days ago, there was an update to the technology. And I saw actually on LinkedIn, it was last night or this morning, someone has actually got the updated version of ChatGPT to successfully pass an ACA exam. And interestingly, a few weeks ago on the old ChatGPT technology, it just about failed. So that shows how fast these advancements are going, and the need to master this technology, but also that importance of the human side to do what technology can't do. And in terms of still, technology, in terms of the government's digital agenda, MTD for VAT became mandatory for all VAT registered businesses from April last year. MTD for ITS has been put back twice and is currently now due to be introduced from 2026. We'll see if that happens or that's pushed back again. And over the year ahead, we're now in a really very uncertain economic times. It looks like in the UK we're going to avoid that technical recession, which is defined as, I think, two negative, two sort of drops, two quarterly drops in GDP per, two drops per quarter, success drops per quarter. It looks like we are going to avoid that, but the economy is still contracting. And in terms of the precariousness of the situation we are actually in, data that came out from 2022 around insolvencies showed that they're actually up 30% with 22,000 firms going bust in 2022. So I think there's an opportunity here for accountants to, in terms of reclaiming that role as the trusted advisor, which they reclaimed during COVID. As we move into these uncertain economic times, there's more and more of a need for accountants to provide that role rather than just making the numbers add up. So the first topic I wanted to kick off with is technology needs. There's always new tools coming out. I wanted to ask our panel, I'll kick off with Izzy. I mean, how do you keep on top of the latest technological developments? And obviously, I'd love to hear, through the lens of coming into Harris Rosenberg and modernising, processes. Obviously, you've gone on a different journey from Angela, because you're taking legacy processes and introducing new tools, where Angela is very much coming at it from scratch.
Yeah, so the first thing would be to build up a network of other accountants. We're quite a friendly bunch and we collaborate quite well together. And I've also made it a priority to attend the various accounting exhibitions. So that will be including the Accountex, Digital Accountancy Show, etc. And through that, you get to meet the exhibitors and see what technology they have to offer. You've obviously got to then do your own research, make sure that it works for you. And also, like I say, collaborate with people who are using it already, people who've tried it out, and get their feedback to understand if it's right for you to use it.
And from a personal perspective, have you found, in your own experience, some of these events that you've spoken about, have you found some more useful than others? I appreciate when you're running a practice, time is the one thing you don't have enough of, and to make a business case for taking that day out, especially if it's in a different physical location to where you're based, from a personal experience, which events have you found better than others or best?
Without wanting to offend the ones that are not going to get on this list, yeah, I would say the one that I found the best is the Digital Accountancy Show. I found that was very much focused on the technology side, and it was smaller, but the lineup of speakers were much better, and the actual exhibitors were a lot more focused on what we actually needed.
And in terms of your time spent between networking, speaking to vendors about new tools, and presentations, what was the split?
In terms of how much time I spent?
Yeah, because in terms of getting the most out of the event, you mentioned obviously networking being a key part. I just wondered from events, how important is the networking part of finding out about new technology?
Oh, well, the networking is key, because when you go to the event, the exhibitors have got, obviously, without any disrespect to them, but they've got one goal in mind, and that's to sell you their product. Yeah. And they're obviously, as much as they want you to be happy with what they offer you, but they still have their targets to meet. Whereas when you go and when you network with other accountants, speak to other accountants, they're not biased. They want to just give a sort of unbiased advice, really, on what would work best for you, and you'll get the true sort of feedback from them.
Peer recommendations is best rather than the vendors. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yourself, I know that when we spoke a couple of years ago, another webinar we did together, you have an encyclopedic knowledge of new tools coming out. It'd be interesting to hear. Do you do some of the, in terms of your research, keeping on top, do you do a lot of the same as Izzy, or do you have a different approach?
Yeah, so I think so Finflare, we work primarily with tech businesses, digital disruptors. So I get a lot of insight from my clients, and just working in amongst the exec teams, working alongside the technical teams, the dev teams as well. And we, interestingly, at Finflare, we have picked up a number of the tools that they use to manage their business. We can chat about that during the practice management section. But from a starting point of having nothing, it was very good just to be able to build up your app stack from scratch and work out what was best for you and for your clients. I think one of the downsides of starting from scratch is that you're really drawn to all the nice new bits of tech, and you get really excited and energized by it.
Yeah.
You're a bit of a tech magpie. Anything that shines, you just want to go and have a look at. And I think that can be quite distracting, and it takes, you're always looking, investigating, researching, trialing it out. And as our practice has grown, the key thing for me is, right, okay, you just need to get down to it. You just need to be consistent. And what are you going to use and what are you going to roll out? So I'm always open to new ideas, and I love speaking to fellow accountants as well, because they will be doing more wide-ranging things with their tools, and it's good to get that feedback.
Thanks, Angela. And in terms of the event side, do you go to any of the big sort of accounting web or digital accountancy events, or do you sort of not, because you're too busy?
No, I have, and I haven't been to any recently post-pandemic, and that was just because of timing of the events. They were just spectacularly bad timing for me personally, but whenever I've been, it's the energy you get when you're in these big rooms with people who are, coming together to find out more about their profession, what's relevant, what's new. I love the energy of these, because you go back to your practice and think, right, what can I do? What's the next thing?
And do you in Scotland, are there any big accounting expos in Scotland? Because I'm pretty sure there might well be, but
no, there aren't. So typically I would go down to London or go to Manchester.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've got the critical mass up here, but that's quite nice to get down to London. So it's good.
If you've got clients to meet up, you can sort of you can sort of find other purposes. I know when he's down, he normally has other meetings as well. And Angela, in terms of your current app stack, and I appreciate this is going to be pretty big. What are you currently using? Just to be clear, your client base is very much high growth tech companies, right? So is that just, can you just confirm that? Is that right?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, we do have some in other sectors, and they are VC backed or investment backed. So we have a kind of range of tools that are accounting tools, as well as non-accounting tools that we would use within there. So in terms of the accounting apps that we have, we work exclusively with Xero. It's just a nice piece of kit, and we find that our clients enjoy using Xero as well. And we pair that with Dext. We get really good efficiencies in terms of processing. For expenses, we would use Pleo and Cladara. So Pleo for the staff expenses, coupled with Xero expenses if there are staff who don't have Pleo cards, and Cladara really for managing our SaaS subscriptions at clients, which is like a prepay card, but they can manage their SaaS subscriptions, turn them on and off. The CTO can see how many seats they've got on their software tools, and that's a really good piece of kit to actually manage all these bits of software that come in monthly. For payroll, we use BrightPay, and that links lovely into Modular. So we use Modular for our payment system as well. And for reporting, for the base packs, for the standard base packs for the earlier stage businesses, and for the mid-sized businesses, we use Fathom now. So we recently switched to Fathom, really loving that. But for larger clients, we might use Power BI, for example, because we'll be bringing in other data sets that the client will have and will need to merge for their reporting and their KPIs. We also get involved quite heavily in some of the other technologies that our clients use directly. So we know Stripe Connect pretty well for when people are invoicing directly off platforms. Other payment systems like Payoneer and Wise Payments are still pretty prominent, especially when there's overseas contractors. And we've been working with ChargeBee for subscriptions and that whole management. And the next thing that we're going to be looking at is the new Dex piece of software that is for e-commerce. Although I don't have e-commerce, we don't have e-commerce clients, but we do have clients who are billing off platforms, and that might be quite helpful.
Just to be clear on the Dex, they've got so many different products coming out. What is that? What does that product do? Because I'm not actually aware of it myself. The e-commerce.
So I think it was. I'm going to get the name wrong, but they bought, was it Greenbank or something? I can't remember what it's called. But basically it's a tool to be able to manage the sales online and bring the sales information into Xero. So it's a mechanism that sits between someone's platform or their payment gateways or their, to invoice and bring it into to zero.
Right. So
And we're looking at that
instead of like Salesforce or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it would generally take sales information directly off a platform or a marketplace. So if someone's selling on eBay, for example.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting. I think Cladara is super interesting. I think I first learned about it from you again a couple of years ago, because I know a lot of your businesses are very technology based, but in terms of businesses that have SaaS subscriptions, all types of businesses, they don't need to be tech facing, will have different types of subscriptions. And I think in terms of the operational robustness, it could have visibility on your SaaS subscriptions is important, so you're not wasting money, but also from a continuity perspective, that if any of that goes down because of lack of payments, that can ruin your
absolutely. It's business critical, especially for the, I know I'm tech and tech based, but for these guys who have these software that are bits of the tooling that sit in their product, it's absolutely essential that they're paid and they can see that it's running operationally. And also, we had a client who did an audit of this as part of the Cladara, who realised that they had some payments going through for licenses that were single user licenses and the same product stack. So actually what they're doing is they're effectively using illegal bits of software. And as you come for due diligence, for technical due diligence and exit, understanding what's in your tech stack is really important. So Cladara is really helpful.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm actually just responding. We've got some Q&As coming in. It looks like a lot of your sort of pioneering recommendations are going down. Well, so people are asking for, I'm going to type the answer in for people want to know how to spell. I'm going to put Cladara in there. And if anyone wants any, Andrew, if you've got a minute, I'm talking to Izzy, if you don't mind dropping in some of those in the Q&A, that would be helpful. Sure. Izzy, in terms of yourself, I said interesting, in terms of your client, just starting with your client base, thinking about, in terms of what the strategy, are you across all sectors at Harris Rosenberg, or are there certain sectors that you service more than others?
No, a general practice. We're not necessarily sector specific. So okay. unlike Angela. So so we obviously we have our core tech stack, which is Xero, Pixie, TaxCalc, and then payroll we outsource to Payroll Sorted, and that's it.
Right. Okay. And so, and Pixie will come on to that in a bit in terms of practice management. But in terms of, I mean, as Angela was saying, there's always new things coming out. I mean, Izzy, how do you keep on top of what's coming up to make sure that what you're offering is continuing at the cutting edge, whether that could be new products coming out, filling in gaps, making things more efficient, or maybe with the tools that you're already using, something could come out that is superior. Especially there's some companies who might have come out a few years ago being the first in a category, but then other innovation happens with other vendors. How often do you sort of review what you're using, or do you feel it's pretty robust what you have? You've got quite a tight stack there from what you're saying. So
unlike Angela, my tech stack is quite lean comparatively. Yeah. I always thought I had quite a good tech stack, but now I'm feeling it's quite lean compared to what Angela's got on. But I suppose I've got to sort of reflect back. So when I joined the practice, the extent of the tech stack was an analysis pad. So it was basically starting from the bottom up. So at the beginning, I was involved quite heavily, investing a lot of time checking out new tech stack. I mean, I had previously used Xero going back as far as 2015, so I knew Xero quite well, and that's the one I chose to bring in as the sort of the core software for the client accounting needs. In terms of now, as sort of we've got more embedded and settled with the tech stack that we have, I've found that I dedicate my time in finding new software at the accounting shows. So that would be Accountex, Digital Accounting Show, etc. And also occasionally, if there's a discussion on a group forum, whether that be on a accountant's WhatsApp group or a Facebook group, if somebody mentions some new kid on the block that sort of sparks my interest, I'll go and check it out. But I find that I've got to sort of stay somewhat consistent to continue giving the consistent client service as well. That's where I try and strike the balance, as it were.
Yeah, and I guess from your client base, that the leap of going on to zero might be a relative big deal in the short term, like depending on if they're of a certain age and they've been doing things at the firm for 30 years, right? So
yeah, but I should say that within the clients that we had, then we had some very long-standing clients. What the longest-standing one was 54 years. Who passed away sadly in the autumn. But we have also recruited quite a number of new clients that have joined, and those new clients have been brought on and sold our service to on the basis that we are a forward-thinking firm and everything. So they're kind of expecting us to be in that space, whereas it's not like we're having to have conversations with them to encourage them to advance.
Great. Yeah, they just expect you've got their best interests at heart and will drive them forward where necessary. And Angela, I imagine your clients, some of them must keep you on your toes with new tools in terms of the expectations. How often do you review your app stacks? And it feels like this is something you're just constantly doing, as long as it's not too distracting to the operations.
Yeah, we are. I mean, there's a couple of new things that we've just started in the last 6 months. We started using Notion, which most of our clients use. So we started using it internally as a wiki, and pointing people in the right direction for our key files, etc., and our client documentation and our client processes, etc. And absolutely loving it, to the extent that now we're actually putting it into clients when we go in as part of our operating system for the finance team. So the client will have a Notion site that has their finance function, their finance processes, where they need to find key bits of information, and we will link the Notion page. We'll put links in the Notion page to the key documents that they need to find in their own system.
It's a centralized like a universal source of truth for the client.
Yeah, absolutely, and it just makes life a hell of a lot easier for the client. It takes the friction off of how to do their finance function. It makes the onboarding process for us much cleaner and swifter, and it just looks really nice. I mean, I have to say, with all these new tools, there is a UX UI thing here that just, if it looks good, it will be appealing to the client, it will be appealing to your team, and you'll want to use it. So I think that's one of the things that was great about Xero when it first came out. The interface with the user was really lovely.
I agree. I think it's really raised in the industry, expectations of what people want in terms of usability, and as much from the client's perspective, they're actually get engaged with it. And actually, just responding to a couple of the questions coming through, Ningli has asked about services for subscription, e.g. membership and monthly payment sales and in billing recommendations. Am I right in thinking ChargeBee does recurring invoice?
So ChargeBee manages the subscription and sits between your finance software and your payment gateway. Stripe does it all, so it's got the Stripe invoicing system that you can set up and link into Xero. So Stripe is one of these ones that does it all. It's not, for me, I don't think the UX is quite as nice in Stripe as something like ChargeBee. But there's quite a few of these systems now that just help manage the subscription, and that's really quite important when a platform, so when the client's platform has variable fees on their subscription, so they're not the same each month, so there might be some sort of charge for users or charge for access to data or something like that. These can help integrate into the client's platform to get billing really quite slick.
As I said, if not, you mean that there'll be an element of, if you don't have that, you'll believe there might be an element of manual work, or it will be wrong with reconciliations. Yeah. And actually, just before we move on to the internal practice tools section, I mean, I have with ChatGPT, it is the one thing that touches everything at the moment. I mean, have either of you, are you looking at ChatGPT? Have you ever got time? Do you not think it's relevant, or is this something is your thing you're thinking about now? I mean, Angela, yourself?
Yeah, I'm quite interested in ChatGPT. So we've built a kind of app that sits behind our website, or it will be on our new website, where it's got a client landing page and a dashboard. And the ability, I think, to be able to interrogate some of the financial information to spring up some questions. So, for example, the variances that are in the management information, and maybe interrogate some of that and take some of the heavy lifting out of the variance analysis would be quite interesting. I think all these things are billed as being the next big thing, and really realistically I think they will take the heavy lifting out of things. But if you look at what we do, so we're CFO led, so we like to think that we're very much as part of the team and delivering that CFO led service. If you think about what a CFO traditionally does, it is about insight, and it's about understanding where the business is going and what the financials are telling you in terms of navigating the future, and actually executing the strategy is key. So whilst there's a lot of chat about ChatGPT being able to do things like a traditional CFO would do, the key thing about that is it's about the positioning of the financial information as well. So if you're going out for funding, if you're going out for debt finance, there's a narrative around your numbers. There's a narrative and a story that goes with that.
Yeah, it's
That's
not like
it won't ever. Well, I'll say it won't ever be able to do. Maybe it will be able to do, but at the moment, it's nowhere near being able to do that. So these types of AI tools will be great about taking out the heavy lifting and the boring stuff to free up the time for advisors to be able to help and be that human that helps another human on their business journey.
And we'll come on to that again later in the discussion. Is it, before we move on to internal practice tools, ChatGPT, have you played with it yet, or just it's not there for your priority?
I've had a little play with it.
Yeah,
it's not something that I necessarily need at the moment.
Yeah,
but I'm aware of it, and it's kind of very much on my radar. But my feeling about in terms of how these new tech and AI, how it affects us as accountants, I always reflect back to my early days in my career when my first job was involved in putting entering paper bank statements into an Excel macro, and it was basically to create accounts from incomplete records. And there was a time when Excel then was upgraded to, I think it was Excel 2013, the macro broke and we had to do it in an Excel spreadsheet. And as part of it, I discovered this new thing that come about where you can export your bank statements into CSV. And I remember my employer telling me at the time that eventually they're going to have software that's the bank statements are sent directly into the software. And this was my only job at the time. And I thought I'm going to be out of a job in a few years' time. But with now, 10 plus years on, none of us are out of a job. There's more that need than ever for accountants. And it just means we're not like Angela's saying, we're not doing the boring work. We're doing actually things that matter. And I think
save that because we'll come on to that in a bit. I mean, just moving on to internal practice tools. I think it's really, in terms of the discussion, I think having a real moment, partly off the back of COVID because of remote working and people collaborating more with their clients remotely. I know Izzy, you and Angela have got quite different tools you use. Angela, you actually use, is it Monday.com, which it actually isn't, it's not industry specific. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we use Monday.com. Again, we've got clients that use Monday.com, so we felt it was a good fit. And also one of my new finance directors used Monday.com previously, so she helped set it up. But we use that to track all of our recurring deadlines. So we have a lot of recurring deadlines that you would expect in accountancy practice, you would expect in a team that's running finance functions. But we also have a lot of tasks that are ad hoc that just come up, and tasks that are part of bigger projects that need to be tracked. So Monday's brilliant for that because we can actually hook in to bigger projects with our clients. So you can actually collaborate with clients through Monday. So that's really good for the larger projects that we need to input on, but we're not the only team member that needs to input. What's also very good about Monday for us is that we can integrate easily with email boxes, which I know other practice softwares do, but we're different insofar as we have our Finflare mailboxes, but we also have our client mail inboxes. So with, you know, I'll be Angela at client A at clientb.com, etc. So we can bring in more than one inbox. That's really helpful for us.
So that means that you've got the, it means that you've got that complete trail of conversation with clients. And presumably if you've got another team member, they could pick it up and have that visibility as well of the conversation.
I mean, as we've grown, we've become more and more reliant on Monday, and we live more in it. And I think in a world where there's so many different communication channels, and I can remember a day where we didn't even have email at the practice I worked at when I trained. But now we've got email, we've got Slack, we've got Microsoft Teams, we've got WhatsApp, you've got all these different channels. It's quite nice just to have one home for things and just live in it.
And in term, I know you said it's not specifically for the it's sector agnostic, but in terms of integrations, I'm thinking whether that be in terms of deadlines and visibility, Companies House, HMRC, or integrating with Xero, is that possible? I take it there's probably not direct integrations, but are there sort of third-party ones that can pull that in, or not? Is that not the case?
Yeah, I think there probably are mechanisms to do it, and to be fair, I think we're just scratching the surface of Monday, and I think there's lots of stuff that we can do within it. I mean, I have a client that does time tracking in it, for example, and billing, but since we don't do timesheets,
yeah,
we don't have a need for it just yet.
Thanks, Angela. And Izzy, you use Pixie, which is practice management specifically for the accounting sector. Can you tell us about the functionality of that and how you use that and why you use it?
Yeah, so Pixie has an inbox feature where it links in with your inbox, the team's inbox, and then also you have a shared inbox. And then you then have a CRM system that keeps up your client list, and you can create certain tasks within your clients, and they can be recurring tasks, so for the regular repeat work that you need to do for them, and it can go automatically to the designated team member. You then also have the various sort of customized boxes that you can have for the client. So, you know, depending on what, you can customize it as you like. So if you wanted to have, say, for individual clients, you wanted to know what their July payment on account was, etc., then you can just send out an email to all of them, say you need to make a July payment account, put the placeholder in of X, and then that just goes straight out. There's a whole host of features with it as well, that you can embed Loom videos as well into the tasks, into the custom tasks that you create. So if you wanted to give instructions to your team, you could create the instructions on Loom video, then embed that into the task, and then that goes straight on for them. The email function, then, so you can link that to a particular client, because also you can link it to a task within the client, and that gives you the ability to keep a log of all your conversations that you're having with clients. And then if an email does come through that's not actually linked to a task, you can actually create a task from it. So sometimes clients will email in requests. So I know what Angela was saying is that we have loads of communication channels nowadays, and it can get confusing where the conversation was last left off. And so my view on it generally is I do like to keep good communication channels open, but what I tend to insist on is if somebody sends me specific instructions, I'll say, if we're having the conversation over WhatsApp, I'll just say, please email me so I can action it. And then that way I can manage the tasks like that.
So Matt, go on.
You go, Nick.
It sounds like it's interesting, because one of the questions I was going to ask you both is about, you know, features currently lacking. It sounds like we all rely on WhatsApp so much now, and it's quite interesting. I was following the story on SVB Bank, the UK arm, over the last week, and about how the news of it in the UK potentially going under and the mission to save it, this all took place on WhatsApp. And it sounds like there is a real need to, whether it be for practice management tools that are specifically accounting related, or general ones like Monday. It feels like WhatsApp integrations is desperately lacking. That feels like a feature that would be really needed, right? If that could put in the view of those conversations as well.
Yeah, there is a bit of a challenge, quite a challenge with WhatsApp though, in that if you have multiple team members, there's only one WhatsApp number. So
Yeah.
you're going to have one WhatsApp number. So unless you have a WhatsApp group, if a client messages in, it's not like emails where multiple people can get to see the same email address, the same email inbox. Whereas here, if a client emails a team member, then you as the manager, practice owner, won't actually get to see that message unless the team member shares it with you, or it's in a shared group or something. So I think I suppose there would be a space there for someone to create that shared WhatsApp number feature.
Whether Meta would allow that, I mean, is a whole other thing. And again, just moving the conversation on service delivery. When we're speaking of, I kicked this off by talking about how digital adoption has really accelerated, especially post-pandemic, and now in terms of that close to real-time data. And Izzy, you mentioned about now it's very standard bank feeds coming directly in software. You can set up rules to automate a lot of that bookkeeping. You still need the human level to check it and make sure there aren't aren't errors. But if we're going with the hypothesis that automation has really enhanced close to real-time data, and if from a compliance perspective that has in terms of the speed of delivery, the speed and quality of compliance work, and this is a hypothesis, you might disagree with me on this, but if that means it's actually harder to differentiate yourself from doing a VAT return from your competitors, how do you stand? How do you stand out, or do you disagree? Or do you disagree with you? Do you think that in terms of automation, really making compliance filings painless and accurate? Maybe you disagree with me on that. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think it's more about the personal service that you give to the client. You're not necessarily selling you're not really necessarily providing them the fact that the VAT returns get done. It's also the fact that they know they can sleep at night, things are being looked after by somebody who knows what's going on. Automation is great, but there are times when things don't go the automation doesn't get it right, and you need to have that human sort of oversight over it just to make sure that it is right. And
have you got an example where you've really saved a client where maybe there was something that wasn't right for whatever reason, where you stepped in in terms of the something automation led that didn't do quite what it was meant to do?
There's nothing necessarily that it sounds badly saying, it's nothing necessarily that comes to mind immediately, but something just about where automation, not necessarily a directly linked case, but something where automation wouldn't get it right would be say when I have a recent conversation I was having with somebody about being limited company versus sole trader, and there's because the benefits aren't so great anymore for limited company owners, but there are other benefits in terms of the protection of personal assets, etc., and also the fact that you can then spread your tax, your personal income over different years to keep in the lower tax band. So for that particular person, they weren't earning enough to get into that. Now, automation wouldn't necessarily be able to get that sophisticated and personalized to a particular person. But now that there is something that has come to mind, something that automation wouldn't necessarily be able to pick up. So something that you so as I'm speaking there, something that's come to mind is that, as you know, with limited companies, you can claim back charitable donations as a reduction to the taxable income of the company, but it cannot create a loss for the business. So one particular thing that automation wouldn't necessarily be able to work out is if somebody, say, invested, you can have somebody where on a profit and loss perspective, they've made a profit in the year, but then they've bought a load of machinery that qualifies for AIA. So if you go and claim the AIA and you work out their charitable donations, it actually takes the business into a loss, and therefore they're not getting relief on the charitable donations. So automation will just say, well, it's too bad, you made a loss. Whereas you apply the human brain to it, you can then see that there is an opportunity to say, you know what, we're not going to claim AIA, we'll do written down allowance instead, and therefore allow the company to make a profit, which means they can get relief from the charitable donations.
Thank you. I mean, that's great. I guess so. What you're saying is, in terms of standing out, it sounds like you offer a lot of advice on the tax planning to stand out. or tax advice, but also I guess you've got in terms of something out from competitors, you've got Harris Rosenberg, so many years of history, right? That you have that, presumably, with your client base, you are a trusted, brand that's been around, so long. Whereas Angela, you're coming at this from scratch. And I think it's quite. We'll pivot a bit to advisory, but I know, Angela, that what you offer is more advisory services than the compliance. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, we've done the pivot from advisory into compliance, which sounds a bit nuts on the face of it. But so I was a freelance CFO working with startups and scale-ups, and what became apparent to me was that the numbers weren't right. And actually, if I could build a team to deliver the finance function, the numbers would be right, they'd always be right, and I could give better advice. So I think that's where the automation is absolutely key, is that if the finance engine is turning efficiently and effectively, then the advice, you can spend much more of your time on the advice. And actually, from an accountant who was in practice to someone who moved into to industry, it became apparent to me that actually the numbers, the year-end accounts, none of that is particularly interesting. I mean, it's important, but it's not particularly interesting. It's not really high up on the agenda of an internal FD. So, it was quite an eye-opener for me back in those days to realise that.
Thanks, Angela. I think what you're both saying, it was like, if you can, in terms of automation, if you can get that clean data set very, very quickly from a tax planning perspective, it gives you more, you can advise clients better on what to do, whether they have a liability, they need to buy, potentially need to borrow money, or it just gives them oversight into how to use their cash balances better. And then I think just to close this off before we open it up to questions, keeping this very much on the human side, the last topic is on skills, needs and staffing. Izzy, we'll kick off with you on this. What are the skills that you think accounting professionals need in 2023 and beyond?
So I think the first skill, the most important skill for an accountant in 2023 is technical skills now, in terms of IT. So you can be there are plenty of people out there who are very good accountants, but they've got no idea how to use software, and as a result, they end up not doing things right, not being able to offer the right service to their clients. So I think that's first and foremost, and then being able to identify what the client's pain points are. Every client has different needs. You need to know what their personal goals are as well, because ultimately that is what they are doing. Well, that's the reason that they're getting up in the morning.
Being inquisitive to ask the right questions.
Yeah, being inquisitive. Yeah, don't be embarrassed. Sometimes you have to ask people things like even very personal things, is like, how strong is your relationship? Because if you're talking to somebody who's where their relationship is a bit unstable, you don't want to start advising them to give shares to their spouse.
Mm-hmm. So you think almost, so when you say relationship, you're with their partner rather than the firm, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, with the partner. Yeah, yes. So that's what I say. You can't be afraid to ask personal questions and to.
Yeah. So I guess it's going back to that really old, not in a bad, but old school way of almost like having that really solid relationship with your client base. So it sounds like what you're saying is mastering technology skills in terms of the human side, really asking the right questions. Can you script that? Do you think? I mean, if you have, if you've got staff members that are a bit more sort of introverted, can you always give someone a script to ask those questions, or do you think you have to sort of have those skills to be, to be able to like read people and respond to people?
I think you need to have those skills to read and respond, because otherwise what you're going to do is, if you had a script, firstly it'll be quite a long list of things, and most of them are going to be irrelevant, and then the client's going to get frustrated getting asked. It's almost like you're talking to a call center where clients getting asked questions that are totally irrelevant to them. So
authenticity piece, yeah. Angela, in terms of yourself, do you agree with Izzy on those points, or do you care to expand on that at all?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's about human interaction and the relationship, and I think it will always be about that. I think people have got to be thoroughly interested in their clients and want to take ownership for their part of their client's success and their client's journey. I know that sounds a bit one of these cliche things you say, but you can really tell the difference between a member of the team who's completely engaged with that client and one who isn't. And I think as someone who's bit older than some of the team, I think there's a communication difference in younger people that I've worked with, and I think there's a hesitance to pick up the phone and have the conversation. And I think sometimes the good old-fashioned telephone or the meeting is the best way to communicate, because you capture so much more of the essence of what's required and what needs done, and the pain points of the client. So yeah, I totally agree. The human interaction is absolutely essential.
And interesting, it's Andrew, it's interesting because I guess the stereotype is accountants, are introverted. Obviously, that's a sweeping generalization. But my question is, if people can't, how can you, sort of younger professionals coming through don't necessarily have the inclination or the desire. I mean, there was a story I read in the Times at the weekend. It was saying how now the etiquette is, if you want to go and ring the doorbell of someone or call them, you've got to text them first. Apparently, if people get a phone call out of the blue, if you're a certain generation, it means someone's died or something bad has happened, and so almost it's just bizarre. But I mean, how do you teach your younger colleagues that sort of skill set?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, but it's mainly just on the job coaching when they ask a question, guidance on how to deal with something. And more often than not, I find it's about communicating with the client that they're asking for. Excuse me. And quite often I'll just say, just pick up the phone them, they'll be fine. Just phone them and ask them. It's just quicker than 16 emails back.
Habit getting into it and not being scared of the phone. And just to close off, we're going to keep a few minutes open for questions. I've got a few that have come through that we're going to run through. But if you've got anything else you'd like to ask for our panelists, if you drop them into the queue, and I'm just going to pick some of the ones we've got out here. I don't know. Delanfi is asking, what do you think of SAP Concur for supplier invoice automation? This links with Xero. Have either of you used that? I appreciate you might not have.
I've only ever used it at a client because their customer requested them to use it. I just found it quite troublesome and quite hard work. It may have moved on significantly. I don't have huge experience of using it for customers' businesses, other than if their customers demand it.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Izzy, I take it you probably haven't used it, I'm assuming.
I've not used it. I've heard the adverts for it though.
Right. And then this is quite an interesting question from Brendan. When looking at new apps, is there any advice regarding an assessment of the longevity of an app, i.e. will that company continue or drop support? I mean, it's actually quite interesting, just a bit of wider context. I saw that there was Connect 4, which is a communications tool for accountants, which looked like a great product that I think it was actually going to shut down, but it's been sold on to a tech-led practice. I don't know what they can do with it next, but do you, in terms of the robustness of what you use in terms of longevity with apps, I mean, Andrew, is that something you sort of consider or do any due diligence on, or you just have to have a hunch that it's got enough VC money behind it?
Yeah, we do do a bit of diligence. We do a wee bit of diligence on it, but I think it depends on how much cash and time is needed invested in it to make it a success. So it's kind of rewards versus the risk. But the point on Connect 4 is we used Connect 4 initially and we loved it initially, but it was unreliable, so we had to move away from it, which is probably why it's not being so successful. So I think it's just using things and seeing if they do actually work for your practice.
So you don't pull up like the financial statements or see how much VC cash they've raised or anything like that?
No, I don't actually. Maybe I should. I would do a wee bit of a route around on Crunchbase, or just to see, what the company is about and where they're based, and just to get a feel from their website. I'd probably do that.
It's quite interesting because I think that as we've moved, and Angela, I'm sure you've seen this a lot of your clients in 2023, the VC funding environment has changed so much that I think we are going to start to see a bit more M&A activity in the sector. And when these companies are acquired by some of the bigger players, you assume they're going to have more resources put into them, but they don't always, from what I've heard. I don't want to. Yeah,
I think you're absolutely spot on, and I think there's been such a huge number of new accounting tools that have been released into the market that there's actually overcapacity, really, in terms of the product. If you think about it logically, you will probably only ever use one product for part of your systems that you need. So there is going to be a bit of cannibalization there and a bit of M&A, and the VC scene has very much changed from funding product to funding revenue now. So there's, if the revenue traction is not coming through, there'll be a lot of them that will just go.
Watch those prices go up. Izzy, your stack is a bit tighter. Do you, in terms of longevity, is that something you think about, or not really, because they're pretty evolved, the tools that you use?
No, it's a very important thing, the longevity. I mean, it was an app that I really believed in about 3-4 years ago, and I thought that was going to be the next hit over Zero, and it's just almost disappeared. And I think, from experience, what I find is, look at the leadership team. How passionate are they about their app? How committed are they to it? Like every business, it's going to go through its challenges, but are they the type that believe in it so much that they'll be willing to stick through it and push it through the challenges, or they're just the ones that are going to walk away? If it's the latter, then obviously I've not got much confidence in the app and the longevity of it.
Great, thanks, Izzy. And I think
one thing on diligence I would point out is about info security, data security. That's one thing I would always look at. That's
actually quite interesting. Am I right in thinking there's a couple of specific standards? Is it ISO 201? Is that the gold?
Yeah,
the gold standard?
ISO 27001 is around InfoSec, but it's just, if they have a policy on their website about info security, what they do with the data, how they, not just the data privacy, but what their encryption is, how they protect the data, then that's a strength point for you to then think about whether that's adequate. If there's nothing on their website about that, then that's a massive red flag.
Because I imagine that's probably quite an onerous and expensive thing to go through. The earlier stage companies are less likely to have that, I would assume.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're building an app and you're putting an app out that's going to have personal data on it, you need that, that's the core of your product, and you need to make sure that it's in place. So
I think just time for one last question. This is from Ali. Do you have any recommendations for forecasting software that caters for freeway forecasting, P&L, balance sheet, cash, and something that copies with deferred revenue? I think I can just see this. I think Masha is actually in the process of answering this, so let's see if she's good. See what she's going to say. I don't know. It's a microphone, and I don't think she's going to talk or she's typing. But,
oh, Nick, sorry. I was just as a moderator, I was just showing that to answer it live. But yeah, this is obviously going for you guys.
Right. Okay. There's so many tools on the market. A lot that begin with, I know, like F, whether it be Float, Futurely, Fathom. I think there's one other F. Angela, is there anyone in particular you can recommend for your forecast?
So Float doesn't do a 3-way cash flow.
Yeah.
And I feel bad about. I think Float's good. It just doesn't really work for us. Fathom, the reporting is pretty good if you've got a straightforward financial model. Yeah. I hear wonderful things about. I think it's Castaway. The Australian one. I hear wonderful things about that. I can't use it because I use Mac and it doesn't work in Mac OS, but I hear wonderful things about that. We still use a lot of Excel for financial models because there sometimes is quite a bit of intricacy in the drivers and the valuation models. So we still use a lot of that, but Fathom is good for doing basic three-way modeling with some scenarios in it. So we quite often use that for clients who have simpler needs and maybe need to look at scenarios quite frequently.
It's interesting because, again, the feedback I'm hearing is yeah, if you have some of the cloud tools can be great for clients with relatively simple business models, but in terms of the granularity of those drivers, especially the sort of businesses you're dealing with in the tech sector, the different sort of inputs and scenarios, you're not going to get the complexity with a lot of these cloud apps. Izzy, with yourself, have you got any recommendations for three-way forecasting when you guys, you stick with Excel?
More, again, reluctantly more sticking with Excel. I think when you're doing forecasting and these reports for clients, you need to know you need to know what the client's needs are. So some of these apps, they churn out lots of different bits of data, but so I often find that too much data is less. So they can churn out data that's just irrelevant to the client, or just things that it's going to be very difficult for you to explain to them and for them to understand. And you need to really home in and focus on the things that they need to know, which they won't necessarily tell you. Sometimes you have to work it out yourself.
The human element, asking the right questions, right?
Yeah.
So, and the point of data is interesting because now there's so much data, but it's like there's no point in measuring or capturing data for the sake of it. And then, yeah, I think that we're going to close that up. Masha, thanks so much for facilitating this, and for Izzy and Angela for both sharing, very different but equally valid insights. Great to have two panelists that, coming up from two very different angles. So yeah, thanks. I hope that everyone found that useful today.
Yes, thank you very much, Nick, Izzy, and Angela. So we will be sharing the recording, and also we will be sharing the questions with our panelists. So Angela, if you will have time, you will get back to the many, and Izzy, you as well, to the many questions on the abstracts that we have received today. Thank you very much, everyone. We have got lots of different insights to continue this moving forward. So keep updated to our updates, the next webinar sessions, events, and we will try to, we hope that it was useful and educational, and